Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and you're in line for another interesting hour of all kinds of good things to talk about. We've got a whole list of them, but before I get into that, I just wanted to bring it to your attention that if you go to our web player at thinkradio.ca...
Let me take over here, Nick.
Why don't you do it? Because I'm butchering it.
Well, you're not butchering it. It's just that, I'm the technically competent person here. Which
like
is really
I said,
kind of
I'm
funny
butchering
because,
it.
We've gone to this whole thing from time to time about our time together in the Navy, where we were in two ships that passed one another.
In the night.
Or in the daytime, I don't know. Anyway, so, Nick's the technical guy. He's the engineering guy. And
you want to know how to raise steam? I can help you.
Yeah. So anyway, look, there it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing to make adjustments to make our show more listener-friendly and more audience-friendly. Now, if you've been listening to our show for a while, you'll remember that we used to use the Spreaker chat function that was part of the player that we were using for our live playing. And then we stopped using that for a number of reasons. We went to a comment section that we've been using now for the last several episodes. Well, more than just several. I guess it must be, 2 or 3 dozen episodes. And what we've decided this week is that we're actually going to go back to the live chat system with Spreaker. Now, that's a long explanation. I don't mean to bore you. Here it is very simply. For all of you who are listening live who want to chat, and we know that there are a number of you because you participate every week. Right, Nick?
That's true.
Okay. So what you have to do if you want to participate live, click on the chat bubble that's in the player, and it will take you to our chat room. You may have to register with the Spreaker system. That's okay. That's because we don't want any robots or spammers or anything like that in the system. And one of the reasons, actually, Nick, that we're doing this is, to be perfectly honest, we're just having the dickens of a time keeping spammers out of our comments section. Mm-hmm. So this is just a good way of doing it. It makes things a little more smooth for us, and and I think a better experience for you, our listening audience. So there's the explanation. One more time.
It's all about you.
If you want to chat live, and we'd love to have you, and Nick and I are watching the chat room. We know what's going on. We're going to be responding, having conversations while we keep on going with our show here. Click on that chat bubble, register if you have to, and then Bob's your uncle. And there's a topic for a show. We could do one whole show on our
Who the hell is Bob?
Like, where does Bob's your uncle actually come from?
Actually, somebody just sent me an email of old phrases that we don't use anymore, like golly gee willikers.
I use that from time to time.
Do you? Or
yeah, more like
fiddlesticks?
golly gee whiz. Or fiddlesticks. Man, I haven't heard fiddlesticks for a long time.
Or driving a jalopy.
Driving a jalopy. I don't think people even know what a jalopy is anymore, Nick.
Well, that's the whole point. And there's a whole list of them.
Driving a jalopy.
Driving a jalopy.
Now, I like the ones where, wow, that was corny. Like, nobody even knows what that means. Remember when people used to call you square?
Yeah. They used to draw it in the air. Yes.
I still am square, guys. I've always been square.
That's right.
I was the anti-hippie.
The anti-hippie. Somehow that fits.
It does.
And I'm just trying to bring that up now.
You're trying to bring up anti-hippie?
No. The email.
Oh, okay. Listen. Look, let's jump into some subjects here, Nick, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so, look, the first one I think that I want to talk about, we're going to talk about the sex ed curriculum and all that later on, okay? We'll get to that in the second half of the show, so stay tuned. But the first one, and I know you and I were talking about this, Nick, so it's not my subject, it's really yours, and that's the idea of what is it that it's going to take for the public to lose its confidence in the Liberal Party of Canada as we head into a general election in now, I guess it's 2 months from today. Today's the 21st of August.
2 months.
2 months from today. And, I'm not taking the position here, well, maybe I should, Nick, that we should get rid of the Liberals. just from a purely interest point of view, last week the Ethics Commissioner issues a report that can only be described as damning of the Liberals with respect to the SNC-Lavalin scandal. And the polling subsequent to that shows that it hasn't had any kind of an effect on people's opinion. So my question is, what do the Liberals have to do in order to have an effect on the electorate? And are we headed for another Liberal government this fall? Worse even, are we headed for another Liberal majority government? Because I'm starting to get that feeling in the pit of my stomach, Nick. And as a conservative activist, I've had that feeling more than once in my lifetime heading into a general
You're
election.
not the only one. And, as much as I'm trying to set my absolute loathing for progressivism, liberalism, and all those who support it, chief among them Justin Trudeau, to set that aside and try to be objective. Okay, and look, it's not an easy thing for somebody who's hardcore right-wing like I am.
Someone to the right of Genghis Khan?
Yeah, he's a communist, isn't he?
Attila the Hun, I should say.
Attila the Hun,
that's the saying is Attila the Hun.
Yes. Well,
that's another one of those sayings that who knows whether Attila the Hun was right-wing or left-wing?
Well, that's a good question, but if it means that, you're kind of right of Burke, then that would be me.
Yeah, you see, Attila the Hun could be characterized as a progressive in as much as he was trying to impose his system of government and his way of life on everybody else.
And he was using very socialistic methods to do it.
Right, like twisting people's arm,
cutting their heads off.
Using the power of the state.
Yeah,
such that it was at that time.
That's right, and that meant galloping
horses.
That's
interesting. So now we've established that Attila the Hun was actually a progressive.
That's right.
And he wasn't just a progressive; he was a radical progressive.
Was he ever?
Okay.
If you look at
which, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, Nick, but there's your answer right there. If Attila the Hun turns out to have been a left-wing, radical, extremist progressive, then Justin Trudeau and his cohort or whatever are mild in comparison because they're not chopping people's heads off.
No, and I'm not accusing them of that.
Perish the thought.
Perish the thought. We've got enough we can accuse them of. We don't need to go there. Anyway, the thing that gets me is you've got a leader. At what point, I guess what I'm trying to say is at what point do you have to sit up in the morning if you're a liberal and say, you know what, short-term game be damned. I cannot vote in good conscience for these people anymore because they are so corrupt and unethical. We've got a prime minister who has broken the ethics code, the legislation surrounding ethics twice. Now, there is no penalty for that, but he still has broken the law. And you've got him meddling in the SNC situation, the Mark Norman situation, Vice Admiral Mark Norman, a good man who was, gave over 35 years of his life in uniform to the country.
And there's a story that just didn't have legs.
It just died. It disappeared.
Right.
Now, maybe they'll drag it out of the closet and breathe life into it, but I don't know if this recent revelation by the ethics commissioner didn't breathe life back into SNC-Lavalin. I cannot see how, as much as I feel for Mark Norman, for former Vice Admiral, I think he's back at work, so Vice Admiral Mark Norman, good man just treated like garbage by his own government. I can't see anything that's going to bring that back and make a difference. It might come back, but whether or not it's going to make a difference. So all of that to say, how do you wake up in the morning with that as the backdrop and say, yes, Trudeau's the right guy? Are we looking at our own version of Trump derangement syndrome? And I'm talking about conservative, take the T out and put in a C and call it conservative derangement syndrome. Because some of the things that conservatives, and I don't mean just me, but conservatives in general, look at what the big unions in Canada are doing. They're stepping up and saying, we don't care that the Liberal government hasn't fixed Phoenix pay system and that our members, some of them aren't getting paid, some are getting overpaid. If this was a conservative government, and I know it's an old saw, okay, but if this was a conservative government, they would be swinging from every steeple in the country.
For those of you who don't know, the Phoenix pay system is the new computer pay monitoring system that the federal government uses for all of its employees. And it was designed under the conservative government.
Yes, but they told them don't do it.
Yeah, but we're not going to get into all of that stuff. The point is that it hasn't been working properly since the Liberals came to power. They flipped the switch, and there are still people who are working. They're not being paid properly. Some of them have not been paid at all. It's just been a real boondoggle.
It's been a train wreck.
It has been a total train wreck. So that's what the Phoenix system is. I just thought I'd interject, Nick. I thought that people might want to know about that.
But there's no price to pay. They're not paying a price for that. Instead, they have decided that Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives, whether you like them or not, and I've got big misgivings about the Conservatives under Andrew Scheer. I'm not his best friend. But to take the unions and have them use their membership to take on a political campaign to try to destroy a political party because they don't like them is just beyond the pale. Where do you stop? How do you wake up in the morning and say, okay, this isn't working. I can't do this anymore. I know there's lots of people who have done that, but not in the number significant enough to move the polls. And that's the part I don't get.
I think that the real problem here, Nick, is that people are so inundated with news and politics that they've kind of turned it off. And the real challenge for conservatives, and for any political party for that matter that wants to make headway during an election, is how do you break through that background noise? How do you differentiate yourself in a significant enough way that people are going to pay attention? And I'm sorry, the SNC-Lavalin thing was a problem for the Liberals when it first broke, because it was a new story. And people were surprised by it, or maybe they weren't surprised, but it was different, okay? It was something that stood out, but not anymore. So if the Conservatives are going to think that they can run on the SNC-Lavalin fiasco in the next 2 months and win an election on it, I think that that's a terrible mistake. And I'm not saying that they're wrong in principle. I'm just saying from a purely electioneering point of view,
from a tactical point of view,
it's just not going to resonate with people anymore. They've heard it. It's old news. It's become background noise. So that's the struggle. And by the way, I think, if I do say so myself, I think that this is something that I said back then, Nick. And, you were telling me that I was dead wrong, and I was wrong at the time about whether or not the story had legs and would affect polling at that time. I didn't think it would affect polling at all, because I didn't think that it was affecting enough people that it's too complicated. It wasn't simple enough. It wasn't in people's face.
Right.
And at that time, you sort of poo-pooed that and said, no, it's going to have legs, and it did. But then the effect faded, and now it's not going to. I just don't think it's going to have that kind of an impact during the election campaign anymore. So the struggle, the challenge for conservatives, and the challenge for any of the other political parties that want to make headway during this general election season, is to find something that they can run on that's going to really capture the attention of people. And people are going to go, yeah, I like that. Now, Nick, you and I were talking before, about things like tax cuts. And, we were talking about, well, there's this latest proposal, which I think is a good idea, to give tax relief to new parents who are on maternity leave. Right. I think that's a great policy idea. Is it going to resonate? Is it big enough? Is it bold enough? I don't know. But one thing I do know that would work, and I'm not suggesting this would be good policy, but if it was a policy thing that could be worked into the platform, in other words, you could make it fit in financially,
Right.
would be to promise to cut the GST, the federal sales tax, in half, from 5% to 2.5%. Now, you see, that's something that voters can immediately understand, they can sink their teeth into, that has an immediate impact on their purchasing power. They see it when they go to put gas in the car, when they go to buy groceries, when they go
It's
to buy...
what they call a pocketbook issue.
But it's more than... It's not just that it's pocketbook. It's that it's simple and in people's faces, and they can grasp it right away. You know, sometimes in politics, you know, it becomes a bit of an echo chamber where everybody is so convinced that, you know, everybody is going to be up in arms about, for instance, SNC Lavalin, that, you know, they just run with it, and they run with it, and they run with it, and they're convinced that it's going to be effective, and in the end it isn't. And not because it's not a problem, it's a real issue, but simply because it's not going to resonate with the public. And that's, I think, what we're up against here.
Because you're not the only one who thinks that way. That these people have missed a golden opportunity here, because obviously they took full advantage of SNC, and they hammered the Liberals every day for a couple of months.
Just to correct that, I don't think they've missed a golden opportunity with FNC.
Well, I'm not done yet.
Okay, sorry.
The golden opportunity is they didn't think forward and say, okay, we just beat the living crap out of the Liberals. What are we going to offer that's different? And, you know, to show people that not only do we not do that kind of thing, but here's the kind of thing we do. That's the golden opportunity that they missed. If they had come out with the policy that you just talked about cutting the GST, no one would be talking about SNC Lavalin, but they would be talking. In other words, the Conservatives would be setting the conversational table. And that's the golden opportunity they've missed. And now we're still talking about SNC, but guess what? The polls are showing that people just don't care. And I'm pulling my hair out about why people will continue to forgive completely unethical behavior. And maybe it's as simple as there is nothing else. If you take that off the table, I've asked this question 1,000 times. If you take that issue off the table, what's the difference between the Tories and the Liberals?
Well, that's not a fair question to ask me, because I could get into a lot of trouble with my friends in the Conservative Party.
I'm just being honest. Okay, so let me answer it. There is none.
Yeah, look, I think that there are differences. I think that, and the differences are not just cosmetic. There are real philosophical differences. I regret that, in my opinion, and this is not directed to Andrew Scheer, I think this is really endemic in the Conservative Party. It's been this way for a long time. You know, I remember back in 1994, 95, when we were having policy discussions in the aftermath of the disastrous 93 election, where we were reduced down to 2 seats.
Thank you, King Campbell, yes.
As the Federal Progressive Conservative Party. And I remember doing policy meetings and constitutional meetings, etc., within the party, because I was not a reformer. I was still a member of the Progressive Conservative Party. I was very sympathetic to the Reform Party and the platform, but I always felt that, you know, you don't split the party up, okay? It doesn't make sense strategically or tactically to do that. You fight these issues out within the political party that you're part of, and then you move forward as a unified force thereafter. And you know, if I have a problem with Preston Manning and the Reformers, I think that was the mistake that they made. I think that if Preston Manning had wanted to come in and take over the party, the Conservative Party, I think that the opportunity would have been there for him to do that, and then we wouldn't have been facing elections with a split in the Conservative vote. But, you know, setting all of that aside, okay, I was very sympathetic, and I remember sitting down and having meetings on policy and revamping the Conservative policy platform in the aftermath of that election. And what I said at that time to whoever would listen to me was that, you know, at some point in time, we as the Conservative Party, or the Progressive Conservative Party at the time, have to represent something more significant, more substantial than the mere fact that we're not the Liberals. That seemed to be the message all the time, was that, okay, we wanted to be different, but we didn't want to be too different. We just wanted to have a different brand.
So it's like Canada versus the United States. What's a Canadian? Well, I don't know, but he's not an American.
Something like that. So, but there are differences. There are serious, important philosophical differences. But for whatever reason, and again, this is not directed at the current leadership. It's throughout the party that people are afraid to talk about principles and that are starkly different between the Conservative Party and conservatives and the Liberals. And I just don't understand that. I don't understand why we don't talk about freedom. I don't understand why we don't talk about free speech openly and hammer that away. I don't understand why we don't talk about the importance of a free economy, a free market economy. I don't understand why we don't talk more seriously about national defense. These are philosophically, if you get a group of conservatives, members of, and I'm speaking here, party partisans into a room, and you talk about these issues, you'll find that there's a remarkable amount of agreement on them as principles. And then you try to translate them into policy and into a communications strategy that's going to emphasize some of these policies to really differentiate between yourself and the Liberal Party and the progressives that control the Liberal Party today. There's this reluctance to do it. It's almost like a fear. We're afraid of saying that we're really that different. And, we've talked about this before, Nick, ad nauseum now, okay? These guys are just afraid. They really are afraid of being called, racist or extremist or whatever. And so to a certain degree, it's a self-fulfilling type of situation.
So if Maxime Bernier had stayed within the Conservative ranks instead of taking his party and going home, if I can loosely paraphrase the sentence, do you think that the Conservatives stand a better chance in the fall?
Well, yeah, I think that the People's Party under Maxime Bernier are going to take votes away from the Conservative Party. I don't know whether or not they're going to take enough votes away in enough ridings to make a difference, but they will take votes away from the Conservative Party. I don't think there's any question about that.
Okay, well, my point, though, was if the leader had been Maxime Bernier of the Conservative Party, do you think Maxime... what I'm trying to ask is, could the Tories beat the Liberals under Maxime Bernier?
I don't know. I like Maxime Bernier. I like a lot of what he's saying. But the very fact that he walks out of the Conservative Party, where he is a major force, and, I understand that he was feeling stifled, he was feeling, smothered, he was feeling maybe even a little unappreciated. To walk out is bad enough. To walk out and start a rival political party, I think is an indication of a lack of political astuteness that leads me to question exactly how effective he would have been as a leader had he won the leadership in 2017. My confidence in Maxime Bernier as a person and as a policy guy is very high and has never diminished as a result of any of this. My confidence my confidence in Maxime Bernier as a potential political leader, I think, has been badly shaken. And we had Roy Byer on a couple of weeks ago from Alberta, and I think he was quite right about this. I think that what Max should have done is, if he wanted to go out and promote conservatism, then just step outside of the party, sit as an independent, which he's doing now anyway, more or less, in effect, and go across the country from place to place and give speeches, okay? But don't start a rival political party. And I think that if he was doing that and he was promoting conservatism, I think that he would, in fact, have an opportunity at some point in time in the future to step back into a leadership role in the federal Conservative Party.
Right.
But that's never going to happen now.
No, of course not. He's kind of burned that bridge. So, to get back to my original question, because this actually I'm more interested in the mindset of the average liberal voter than I am the scenario around the
Right.
average conservative voter.
Right.
I just can't, and this is the part that I find so frustrating or so hard to understand, because to me, principle means a lot. And like I understand strategy and tactics and so on, but at some point you cross a line. And you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what is it that I believe in? What is it that I am willing to put what hilltop am I willing to die on? And at what point do I have to say to myself, I didn't leave them, they left me. And I just don't know what that answer is.
I think that's there in the Liberal Party. I think that there are a lot of people, well, more than I think, I know that there are a lot of members of the Liberal Party, supporters of the Liberal Party, who feel that way, who are not comfortable with Justin Trudeau's leadership, both his, as a practical matter,
Right.
but also the direction that he's taken the party. I mean, the idea, Nick, that you have a cabinet that is made up of 50% female and 50% male on principle. Okay? Now, I don't care whether it's 50% or I don't care if it's 50-50. I don't care if it's 100% male. I don't care if it's 100% female. But the idea that you're going to sit and you're going to create a cabinet on purpose that's going to be gender balanced, I think that that's an indication of people who do not have their priorities straight. And that's the direction that Justin Trudeau and Justin's supporters within the party have brought the party. They are radical progressives. They are competing with the NDP and the Green Party for votes on the left. If I'm a Liberal card-carrying member of the Liberal Party, I'm asking exactly the question you're asking me. These guys have left me behind. But having said that, brand loyalty is a very powerful thing in all aspects of marketing, and so especially in politics. So there are people who are going to hold their nose and they're going to go, I'm going to vote because I'm a liberal, I'm a member of the Liberal Party, and I'm not going to be disloyal. And then there are other people out there that genuinely believe, despite the warts of Justin Trudeau, that they're just afraid of the Conservative Party. And then, of course, there are the people that go, what exactly does the Conservative Party stand for? At least with the Liberals, I know what I'm getting. So.
Well, that's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. What I'm hoping for, my hope in all this, is that there will be a lot of Liberals who will never vote Conservative, don't like the NDP, and don't like the Greens, and are just going to stay home. I'm really hoping that's what happens. I'm afraid it'll happen in the Conservative camp. I think there's a very real tendency. It won't happen. That won't happen out west. I think you're going to see a landslide victory for the Conservatives in the western part of the country. But as far as how do I continue to vote for this guy? My only hope is their answer will be simple. I'm not going to. I just won't vote for anybody.
I think the answer is simple, Nick. I think that people just don't know and don't care. They've tuned it all out. They don't tune in to elections until very close to the election.
Yeah.
And the scandal with SNC-Lavalin, the scandal with Mark Norman, and other issues are just background noise. I think that the timing of them worked out very nicely for the Liberals. They've got them out of the system, and I'm just not sure that they're going to have any kind of an impact. And
So
when
what
it
do you-
comes down to it, when people actually start to pay attention, they're going to look at what they have with the Liberal government, what they could get with the Conservative government, and they're going to shrug their shoulders and they're going to go, why should I make a change?
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of too. And I really think that if you look at what's her name, Raybould, first two, I can't try to remember her first name.
The former Attorney
Jody
General.
Wilson Raybould.
Right.
Okay, and is it Christine Philpott?
That's a great question. Joan, I think. It's Joan Philpott.
Okay, well,
I can't remember now. Sorry.
her, the two of them.
Madam
Now-
Philpott.
Madam Philpott, yes. I don't think they're going to get reelected. I think they're going to get crushed.
Very hard to get elected as an independent in this
Well, look what
country.
happened to ad scam whistleblower.
Alan Cutler.
Yes, everybody thought he was a rock star
Sure.
and was going to win. And there's a lot of history there about the way his candidacy was handled or his campaign was handled. But at the end of it all, he turned out. And no disrespect to Alan, he's a good friend of mine, but he never stood a chance. And I think when you look at George Canyon, who wants to run as a conservative out in Nova Scotia, the country music singer, he doesn't stand a chance either. He's roadkill. They've got a superstar candidate that's going to get flattened.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, Nick.
Amen to that.
Okay, so we're going to go for a break now, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back on the other side. We have a few bills here to pay. So stay tuned, stay with us, and we'll be back in a few minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show with Nick and Joe. Hey guys, I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you're listening to the Nick and Joe Show. Welcome back. We are sitting here in Bunker B at a secret undisclosed location somewhere in Canada's National Capital Region.
We
We haven't talked that way for a long time, Nick.
No, we haven't. I guess it's like living in Toronto and never going to see the CN Tower. You never think of it that way. We do have the new radar installed here at Bunker B, the progressive radar. It detects progressives within about a 10-mile radius, and you should see it as it swings north, because we're south. It lights up like a Christmas tree. Anyway,
As we get closer to, as our friend Lowell Green used to call it, Sucking Central,
that's right.
otherwise
Ain't that
known as Parliament Hill.
That's the one, yep. Anyway, then it fades off once you come around towards the south, and it lights up again once you get about to the west. And anyway, I'm being silly.
Enough about federal politics, Nick.
Okay.
Let's shift our attention to Ontario, because today, and
Yes.
today's August the 21st, Wednesday,
Yes, all day.
the provincial government
Yes.
announced its replacement for the health curriculum that had been nixed by the Conservatives, the Progressive Conservatives, under Doug Ford. The curriculum had been, what am I trying to say here? Help me out here, Nick.
Well, first of all, Doug Ford said he was going to scrap it and come back with his own.
Right. And there were a lot of
It was all
problems.
about the same-sex education, and it was all about...
Well, not just same sex. I mean, there was a lot of inappropriate stuff. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that this was not just the problems that parents were having with the health curriculum that had been implemented in 2015 under the previous Liberal government was not simply limited to same-sex issues, okay? There was a whole idea of...
Sorry.
See, we can edit that out.
I know.
So there was the whole idea of gender identity, and then other things. For instance, teaching masturbation. I guess we should give people a heads up that there are some sensitive issues here that we're going to be talking about here. So it's maybe more adult oriented than our normal light repartee, Nick. But seriously, the previous curriculum started talking about masturbation, started talking about anal sex, that kind of stuff that really was I think, inappropriate for younger children. Anyway, so the Ford government, after promising they were going to do it, nixes this, goes back to the drawing board, has consultations, comes back and announces today what the new curriculum is. And I don't think that there are a lot of people that are really happy with the changes, the few changes that he has brought in.
Well, no, you're right. And I'm one of them because, first of all, a lot of this stuff the government has no business being involved in the first place. Like whether all the different things that you just listed. Why would anyone? And the answer is, well, the kids have to learn about this stuff. And if we don't teach it, who will? Hello, how about their parents?
Well,
these kids just didn't drop out of the sky.
Well, who was teaching children about sex before the schools took it over?
And we never had a problem maintaining the human race.
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Imagine that. They figured it out.
Now here's some of the things, by the way, Nick, okay, that the liberal 2015 curriculum, okay, would talk about gender identity being a mandatory topic in grade 8. That's for today. It used to be in grade 6. So the current curriculum now that's been introduced by the Ford government has kept that, just moved it from grade 6 to grade 8. Okay. Sexual orientation as a mandatory topic is going to be taught in grade 5, which is a year earlier than what it was supposed to be taught, which was grade 6 under the previous curriculum that the government got rid of.
But the question I have is, first of all, why would you pull that one back a year? Look, grade 6? So what, are they 8 or 9 years old?
Well, I just don't think that this is stuff that should be taught in school anyway.
Okay, well, look, I'm agreeing with you.
I teach biology, okay? This is how the human body works, okay? It doesn't matter what your identity is. It doesn't matter whether you're feminist or not a feminist. It doesn't, your gender identity, your gender feelings, your sexual orientation, none of that matters, and none of that has anything to do with the biology of how the human body works and how human beings procreate. And ultimately, that is an objective subject that is, I think, it's reasonable to teach that in school, okay? All of this other stuff is nonsense. It's, there's a difference between, in my view, teaching about sex and teaching sexuality, okay? But why in heaven's name would anyone have to learn in public school in grade school, by the way, not just public school, but grade school.
Right, instead of high school.
About anal sex? I don't get it.
Well, it's pretty obvious that there's some kind of social agenda behind promoting this particular lifestyle or activity. Let me put it to you that way. And I think that this is what's propelling a lot of this. But there's so much more that's wrong, and I wish we had. For those who don't know, who didn't catch it, when I was still in terrestrial radio, I had Joseph as a guest when the whole thing first broke, leading up to the last election, and that was we talked about. He actually had the act in paper.
Right, the copy of the curriculum.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't have it because I would love to go through some of the stuff that's really wrong with this stuff, taking out the sexuality. Even if you remove the sexuality from it, there's still tons of things that are wrong with this.
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, we're just focusing on the stuff that seems to have been sort of the lightning rod.
The one that I remember is they have to teach kids now how to jump.
Right.
Three phases to jump.
Right. There's
takeoff, in flight, and landing.
And the same, by the way, the same dynamics with respect to throwing a ball.
Yeah. That's where I was going next.
Sorry. So yes. So you have to have a lesson plan where you're going to explain to the children during physical education. That was one of the parts of the, and so the lesson plan or the suggested lesson plan put together what the children had to learn about when you were teaching. So what was the objective? So they broke down the act of throwing into 3 parts. The first part is launching the ball.
That's right.
The second part is the ball in flight.
That's right.
And the third part is
receiving
the ball.
Right.
And that's how you play catch. And, and for the life of me, Nick, okay, I mean, we're laughing at it. And I have to see what the new health and phys ed curriculum says about all of this stuff. Because for me, the stupidity of that was really the problem. And all of the sex ed stuff and gender identity and all that, as problematic as that is, and it is problematic.
No question.
To me, that was just part of the bigger problem. And thinking to myself, only public servants on the taxpayers' payroll could spend days sitting around in offices
dissecting how to jump and how to throw.
Well, this is it. Just take the kids out to the field and
give them a ball
and let them throw it back and forth. And if you want to help them with being able to throw the ball more effectively,
the mechanics of it,
okay, then help them. But I have to tell you, Nick, I stand to be corrected, but I would be very surprised if some of these phys ed teachers have no idea how to throw a ball properly themselves.
This could be as much for them as it is for the kids.
Well, this is what it's become. And, look, again, I have real problems with teaching children all of this stuff at school. I don't think these are subjects to teach in school. School should be about learning how to read, write, some geography, some history. Okay. You want to teach about biology and science and health, that's great. Gender identity, which, by the way, I have to say, Nick, I know it's going to get us into some trouble here, is just a kooky theory. There's no scientific basis to this whatsoever. It's just an ideology. It's a fad. Okay? There's no empirical studies that back any of this gender ideology, gender therapy. I feel like a person. I feel like a girl at 10 years old thing, so I have to have hormone therapy. I mean, that's all nonsense, okay? Mm-hmm. Where was I going with this? So
talking about the overall problem with health.
But none of that belongs in school. There's no need for it in school. And for every minute that you're teaching children about the theory of ball throwing, number one, you're denying them the opportunity to actually go out and throw balls back and forth, okay, which is a fun thing when you're a kid. But you're taking away from precious time that you could be actually teaching children something in terms of skills that they're going to need to become productive members of society.
Aren't teachers' one of the big complaints now is lack of prep time?
Yeah, I hear that all the time, sure.
Yeah, okay, so stop wasting your time with all this nonsense and put it either into prep time or actually take the kids outside and supervise real activities. Like teach them how to play soccer, teach them how to play football, teach them how to play flag football, teach them how to throw a frisbee, teach them 1,000 things. Start an archery club. Do something where the kids can learn real skills. Like there's no better way to teach teamwork in my mind than to teach them sports, whether they be hockey, football, baseball, because those things all require teamwork, which means you have to self-sacrifice, you have to think about the group as a whole and what's good for them. There's a million. It's one of the reasons why sports are so popular and so many kids love it, is because not only is it fun, but they learn so much from it. And we have school boards now wasting their time with this gender identity, which you're right, it's absolutely nonsense. Gender identity class should last about 30 seconds. Kids, there's 2 genders, male and female. Now, let's get on to math. That should be the extent of it if you were ever going to do it at all.
Well, you're being generous. I wouldn't even give it that much time.
I'm just saying, if you were going to do it, that's all it would take.
Right.
Okay, 2 identities, male, female, and you don't get to pick. Whatever is inside your underwear tells you what you are. Or if you're not sure, do a DNA test. Or do a blood sample. Or do, how many chromosomes and what are they? And that'll tell you. You don't need this whole nonsense. So they're taking away time where things like biology history, geography, all the different hardcore things that children need to know. And we wonder why our kids are, for lack of a better, it's not that they're stupid, but they're ignorant. They're not being educated properly. They don't even teach cursive writing anymore. And then you wonder why they can't spell. You look at Facebook, look at Kijiji ads, look at a million different places where the ability to construct a sentence is vital to communicating what you're trying to say. And they fail over and over and over again because they weren't taught properly in school, because too much time was spent learning how to hug a tree, learning how to recycle a can, learning the names of 72 genders. All this nonsense is taking up the time these teachers are now complaining they don't have enough of. That's called a pregnant pause. That means you're supposed to come in there.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something important to say. Look, of course I agree with you. I don't think that I don't think the subject of prep time enters into this, though. Okay? I really don't.
Well,
take whatever time you need to prepare. You're going to have prep time for geography and science and all that stuff as well. So, separate issue. But what our schools, Nick, have become is they've become the crucibles of social experimentation. And, I did a podcast where I mentioned this recently, that you look at the methodology in teaching, for instance, okay? And parents, are supportive generally when the teachers come and say, we think we can do a better job. We're going to change the way that we teach. We're going to change the subjects that we're going to teach. It's going to be better for the kids. But what these parents never realize is that the changes that are being implemented are changes to a system that was already changed because the teachers and the professionals and the experts had some sort of a silver bullet before, and they knew there were problems, and they were going to fix the problems. So really what you end up doing is fixing the problems of the problems. So where am I going with this, okay? I'm saying there's just too much of this ideological pollution in our education system. And we send our children to school because we want them to learn how to read, we want them to learn how to write, we want them to learn how to do reasonable basic math, we want them to have a fundamental understanding, a grasp of science and scientific methods, we want them to have an understanding of basic geography, we want them to know the facts, not the interpretation, but the facts of history. And if you give kids those basic tools, and as they get older, they're going to find their own way. You're not, by not exposing children to all of these esoterical, fanciful, theoretical ideas at a young age, you're not denying them the freedom to explore all of those things later on. What you're doing is you're giving them the tools and the skills to be able to explore all of those things later on in a meaningful way where they can make sense of it.
And when they can handle it, when they're ready for it.
And when they can handle it. So in effect, what I'm saying here, Nick, to cut right to the chase, is that using schools as a tool for socialization and social experimentation, actually, rather than just giving them the kids the skills to experiment later on, you're not opening their minds, you're closing their minds. Because what you're doing is you're shaping their socialization now, for want of a better way of expressing it, and never giving them the tools to be able to think and deal with that they're learning now critically later on. So you're trapping them in this whole area of whatever it is. And this is not, it's easy to say, that I'm being homophobic and stuff like that, but the criticism that I'm making now is a criticism that is just as valid, irrespective of whether you're talking about the
swap
gay
out the
agenda,
topic.
whatever.
It
could be just about anything.
Right.
So you have to give children the skills to be able to grow later on, and that's what it comes down to, is we're not giving them those skills.
They used to teach in school something called logic, and that was the way I understand it, thinking in a linear fashion, being able to put one thing together after another, and to come to, or extrapolate. That's my big word for the century, is extrapolate. To draw from a set of information what is a reasonable, not always correct, but a reasonable point of view. Again, you go back to this idea about transgenderism. It's not reasonable to have more than two. And if you teach kids how to string a sentence together or a thought together like you would put beads on a string, then they don't come to that conclusion, and that undermines the whole, what I see as an agenda driving this kind of methodology in their teaching. It's unfortunate to say that, and I don't think that every teacher believes in that, but enough do, that it's having a dramatic impact on the way our kids learn, and it's very, very dangerous. Now, this is part of the reason why I think one of the things Andrew Scheer is doing is, okay, I'm going by memory, and I may be wrong. I thought he said something about vouchers or tax credits.
Okay, yes, he did. He promised a $4,000 tax credit.
what I was thinking
for children, for parents who send their children to private denominational schools.
Right. I don't have any problem with that.
Well, I don't have a problem with it either.
A lot of people do.
Well, I don't have a problem with it. In fact, when I was running Brad Trost's leadership campaign, we also had the same policy. And at the time, the Scheer camp accused us of stealing their policy. It was a bit of a humorous thing. But here's the problem, Nick. The problem is that just last week, Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party announced that they were dropping that from their platform.
See, this is what blows my mind.
Now, the reason that they announced that they were dropping it from the platform was because they said that the Liberal deficit was too high and that they couldn't afford to implement this policy.
What a load of hooey.
Well, I don't know. I would like to see the numbers myself, but I don't understand why you can't afford to do that, so you nix that program, and then you turn around and you say, but we could afford to introduce a tax relief for parents who are on maternity leave and are getting EI benefits, paternity or maternity benefits. To me, I'd have to see the numbers, but
no, you know what? I don't think you do, and here's why. If they just, pardon me, if they just stop some of the nonsensical spending that's going on, like carbon sequestering is the word I'm looking for.
Say that again.
Carbon sequestering. Okay? If they would stop that, if they would stop corporate welfare, if they would stop sending money. Now, they're not guilty of this that I'm aware of, but sending hundreds of millions of dollars to despotic dictators to whom we will never see a dime repaid. To stop canceling loans to Irving, $7 million. And this falls under the corporate welfare banner. There's more money available for things like this than you can shake a stick at. And I can do a lot of stick shaking. So when I hear somebody say, well, we can't afford it because the deficit's too high, you know how many other places there are that you could cut and actually make a real difference and still give parents the voucher? It's just absolute. What's nonsensical is the idea you would even float that idea that you can't, we can't. That's like, how is it different than Justin Trudeau looking at a soldier who's now injured because of his time in Afghanistan and saying, I'm sorry that we can't give you what you're asking for, and then turning around and giving $250 million to some despotic country over in the Middle East, or giving $10.5 million to a known terrorist?
Well, you're not going to get an argument from me, Nick. I was disappointed with the announcement. Again, taking it at face value, I'm prepared to accept the validity of the argument that maybe it's unaffordable, but I wouldn't mind seeing the numbers to be able to judge that for myself. I haven't seen any numbers. I'm just assuming that when they say they can't afford it, that somebody's crunched the numbers and come up with that.
I'm sorry.
But what really surprises me, what really surprised me about it is that, a week or 2 weeks after making that announcement, then they announced a new tax policy with respect to maternity leave, and that's going to cost somewhere in the order of $600 million. I think I saw was a number when I read this today or yesterday. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad policy. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. We want to help young parents, and so I think that at least in principle, it seems to be moving in the right direction. But I'm a little puzzled as to why we can afford to do that, but we can't afford to do the vouchers, when one of them was, of course, promised during the leadership campaign. And, given the fact that Andrew Scheer won the leadership by a razor's edge, any one of these policies could arguably be the policy that put him over the edge. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I'm not trying to throw stones. I don't get it. I really don't get it, Nick.
The part that makes me crazy is I don't think they thought this through at all. I don't think there was any number crunching at all, because you can't. And when I say you, I'm talking about the royal you.
Of course, I understand that.
Okay, you can't sit here and tell me that there's no extraneous fat that could be cut from the federal budget to make up so you could do both of those things.
Well, the problem with that is that you have to have the courage then to say that we are going to cut this, or this
and isn't
from
that
the budget.
The problem?
And well, I think that's a significant problem. But again, that's not an Andrew Scheer problem. That's a conservative problem.
Who's the leader of the Conservative Party?
No, I understand, but conservatives themselves are afraid. And it's not just Andrew Scheer. I mean, you look at the members of the Conservative caucus, okay, and ask yourself how many of them are willing to stand up and say, we're going to cut this or we're going to cut that. They're afraid to do it. They're afraid of being pummeled in the press. They don't want people to call them extremists. They don't want anybody to accuse them of being in favor of, quote unquote, an austerity budget, which is a word that I saw kicked around in the media a couple of weeks ago with respect to the Conservatives.
But
they just, now for me, I say, promise to make cuts, tell people we're going to cut, where you're going to cut, tell them why you're going to cut, and go out there and run on it. And my guess is that you're going to get support from people. But again, that's just idle speculation on my part.
My argument, and look, the reason why I'm not willing to cut Mr. Scheer any slack on this is because nobody in his party is going to buck the leader, because there's an election coming. They want to get their nomination papers re-signed, and they don't want to stand up and say anything that's going to threaten that. And it's tragic, but explain it any other way to make sense. He will not do it. And that's the problem. Because I agree with everything you said. Okay? That would make sense if they had a leader with a spine. And I call him the Marshmallow Man for a good reason. Because he's like a fluffy little teddy bear with the big dimply cheeks and all that stuff, who hasn't got the courage to stand up and say, this is the difference between the Liberals and the Conservatives. We know we cannot continue to spend money the way that we're spending it. There's too many other high-value priorities that need to be taken care of. Defense, healthcare, education, transfer payments, all this stuff. Okay, we have to deal with this stuff, and we can't continue to spend our grandchildren's money. He hasn't got the courage to say that. So,
well, I think that he's got the courage to say that, but you have to operationalize it. And that means having the courage to say, we're going to cut spending and this is how we're going to do it.
So where's the courage then?
Well, you preach it to the choir.
I know, and I'm not trying to put you in a pigeonhole. I'm just saying that if you, to me, that this is, you've tried it. That let me come at it from this angle. You've tried this tactic of being liberal light. How many elections in a row? Before, and the only way you got elected was when you united the right, you didn't get rid of, but you merged the old PC party and the Canadian Alliance Party together, formed a one coherent unit, and had a lot more conservative things going on than you've got now. Okay, but where are we today? We've got a guy who's liberal light, and people don't want from the conservative. If you're going to make a case to get elected in this country and beat somebody like Justin Trudeau, not only you can't just walk around saying, well, we'll just do what he's doing, but we'll do it more efficiently.
Okay, Nick, I'm just looking at the clock, and it looks like we're bumping up against our hour.
Wow.
So it's been a rather, as I've said before, frenetic pace to our discussions. A spicy meatball. That's actually very good. Somebody could probably make a human rights complaint, Nick, for you having imitated rather poorly, if I might say so, an Italian accent. I'm assuming
that's flattering to the.
I don't know that was actually. Was that supposed to be Italian, or was it supposed to be?
No, that's my interpretation of Italian.
See,
I'm demonstrating my love and respect for the Italian community by trying, at least, to, in a fun way, tease them a little bit about their accent.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, tune into the Daily Rejoinder, which is my daily short podcast on issues of the day. So that's the Daily Rejoinder, all one word.com, or you can pick it up on your favorite podcast network. And Nick's going to be starting up his almost daily 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that's a great name for it, by the way, Nick.
Daily?
Yeah, the almost, because you were talking about doing it, 2-3 days a week?
Yeah,
which is fine. I'm doing it I'm doing my daily podcast 3 days a week.
That's right.
So I think you should call it the almost daily 5 minutes.
That gives me a little more flexibility, I will tell you that much.
Anyway, so send Nick an email, nick@thenickandjoeshow.com, and tell him how much, guys, you are impatient for him to get on with doing his almost daily podcast. In the meantime, send your comments to comments@thenickandjoeshow.ca. Sorry, .com. At thenickandjoeshow.com. That's comments at the Nick and Joe.
That's right.
Comments at thenickandjoeshow.com. And don't forget to share this show on social media with your friends, your family, and the rest of the world. Nick?
That's an hour.
That's an hour.
All right. Well, thank you all for dropping in. We'll see you all again next Wednesday. Good night and God bless.